Welcome back to Rune Rambles. I'm your host, Blah Blah, here to make your grind a bit more bearable. Today's episode, the Skilling Megasode. We're talking all things skilling, from foundations to the future. Log in, listen up, and let's go. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it is finally time for the Skilling Megasode. We did 2.5 hours recently on the boss tier list. I know, you all agree with me in the comments. I was objectively correct. Today's episode, skilling, and you guessed it, more skilling. Now, I'm a little bit of a skilling fanboy now. I've been known to do a little skills here and there. In this megasode, we have 4 chapters. You ready for them? Here we go. Number 1, skill types, skill release order, level up rewards, and understanding of the foundations of skilling. All right. Chapter 2, understanding the core gameplay loop for each skill, the most popular training methods, where do people gravitate for each skill on their journey towards 99. Chapter 3, a framework for looking at skilling holistically. How do these skills integrate with one another? Understanding the core gameplay loop. And finally, my favorite, Chapter 4, skill expression and how do we as a community push skilling forward. Let's dive in. All right, let's get started here. To understand skilling at a foundational level, you have to understand how the skills are divided. You can divide skilling into 4, you guessed it, 4 different categories, okay? Starting with combat, which this is virtually the only time we're going to talk about combat skills in this episode. With combat, you have attack, defense, hit points, magic, prayer, ranged, and strength. These are combat skills because they affect your combat level. I know nobody's out there praying, hoping they get the drop, but other than me. But hey, listen, that combat level is going up now. All right. Now we have gathering skills. These are going to be farming, fishing, hunter, mining, woodcutting. Anything that you're going to do to gather resources in the game. And what do you need to do with those resources? You need to produce something. Production skills such as cooking, crafting, fletching, herblore, runecraft. I know, it's called runecraft technically. We all called it runecrafting. That's the last time you're going to hear that heresy. And smithing. Side note, I can't help but think of that meme of that dude who's got like 2 teeth when I read the word production or produce. Y'all know what I'm talking about? Produce me some string beans. Produce me some ketchup. Produce me some corn. Produce me some produce. I want you to produce me some produce. You probably already clicked away from the podcast, but hey, that was worth the price of admission. All right, now we're going on to utility skills here. Those are going to be agility, construction, fire making. Is it even a skill, folks? Sailing. Howdy ho, sailors. Slayer, not to be confused with sailor. And finally, thieving. Let's actually take a look at when these skills released, okay? So I've got the wiki up here. We're going to talk about it all. We're going way back to the early days. We're not just talking 2013 when you little fellas got on that poll booth for the first time and said, please give us OSRS. All right, we're going to go back to 2001. All right. First up on this list, all right, first initial batch of skills included woodcutting, a familiar fan favorite, tailoring, soon to be crafting, strength, smithing, ranged. Now this is where it gets interesting. Pray evil and pray good. Watch out for that now. Mining, influence. This was replaced with quest points on the 10th of May, 2001. Very interesting. Good magic, as you can imagine. Evil magic. Fire making, defense, cooking, hit points, attack. That's it. That is it. Hit points was actually known as hits at the time of release, which is very interesting. Directly following this, about 4 months later, they started to drop new skills. You actually got 2 in the month of May of 2001. You got crafting. Prayer got combined back into just standard prayer, as did magic. And then in June of 01, you get fishing. About 8 months later, you get herb lore, originally known as herb law. All right, in March of '02, we get fletching. Then we get carpentry in '02, which it's interesting. It doesn't really have any function at the time. I remember construction getting dropped anyway, so this did not really have any effect. Thieving got dropped at the same time, which is interesting. Agility in December of '02, Runecraft in '04. That's right. All those years of casting spells, you could not make your own runes from '01 to '04. Sorry about it. The best skill in the game got dropped January 26, '05. That will be Slayer. Holler at your boy. Farming, July 11th, '05. Construction, I was there for it. I remember the home screen, May 31st, '06. And let me tell you, I remember those salamanders on my screen for this one. Hunter, November 21st, 2006. Then we took a break like Guthix did for about 20 years, and then Sailing came out. So lots of different skills have been released into the game. You can definitely see this trend. I mean, the bulk of the skills came out in about a 5-year period, and RuneScape kind of became known for skills coming out very regularly. Um, of course, in RS3, at the time RS2, this continued with things like summoning. Um, and really beyond that, honestly don't even remember. But nowadays they've got things like divination, archaeology, all this other madness, necromancy, divination, whatever. I probably already said that going on in that game. All right. So essentially, that is how and when we got those skills. Now let's talk about how these skills work. Okay, like what is the core concept of what's going on in this skill? We know we hate all of them; they're just a means to an end. But what is actually happening within these skills? Okay, so let's talk level up rewards. Like what is the core thing that you are aiming at with each of these skills? We're going to go in alphabetical order here, and we will include our combat skills. With agility, the whole purpose here is kind of twofold. You have access to convenient shortcuts around the game, which I would say progressively get more convenient. And there is so much debate on the convenience and validity of these shortcuts. How much, if you've listened to any of those save casts, how many ticks you're actually saving versus it actually being slower. But regardless, it's there. Shout out Calfight Lair. Nobody wants to do that diary. But more importantly, like slower run drain, faster run recharge, that's really what you're aiming at there. They've done a lot of rework here to really kind of remove the friction from run energy through agility. So I think that's been a positive change. So again, agility, access to different areas of the game, access to different areas of the game more conveniently, and then overall, slower run drain, faster run recharge. I might actually be wrong about the run drain, but regardless, faster run recharge. Attack. Very simple. Access to higher tier weapons and wielding those weapons and a higher chance of rolling damage. Construction, another fan favorite here. This is going to give you access to more conveniences within your player-owned house. I can already tell you right now, this is. Oh, I'm tangenting, but the moment you get a maxed house, your life changes. Okay, so just invest the money. Do some mahogany homes. We're going to talk about that later. Construction is a banger. All right, cooking. Ability to cook higher tier food. Yep, freaking E. Crafting. Ability to craft higher tier jewelry, armor, utility items. Obviously, you're creating things, you're crafting things from scratch. Defense, for those of you who don't know, of course, access to higher tier armor, but also a lower chance of taking damage. I did not quite realize that. Go listen to my first podcast episode. Farming, access to higher tier herbs, farming resources for potions, foods, whatever you may need there. Fire making, dumbest skill in the game. Access to logs for faster XP. That's really about it. Some light sources, some small activities. Nothing really going on. Fishing, you've got access to better food for healing damage. We're going to rattle these off. Fletching, access to crafting better bows and ammunition for the range skill. You can see that synergy. Herblore, the ability to make potions in general and also make stronger potions as you level up. Hit points obviously gives you more health. Hunter gives you access to hunter creatures, and most of them have pretty minimal importance outside of Chinchampas. So I think Hunter's in kind of a weird spot here. Magic, obviously better spells, enchantments, damage, but most importantly, and if you didn't know this as a new player, the higher your magic level, the more defensive you are against magic attacks. So training your magic, very, very purposeful. Mining, of course, better ores, which can be smithed later on with the smithing skill. Prayer, access to better prayers and higher tier bones for XP, and some gear here and there. And prayer. Ranged, higher damage output, of course, with ranged skill and access to better ranged gear. Pretty self-explanatory. Rune crafting, the ability to craft higher tier runes for magic. That's how those synergize. Slayer, again, fan favorite, my favorite skill. Access to specific monsters with unique drops, mechanics, lore. The list goes on. Smithing, kind of the inverse of mining, the ability to produce, ability to smith higher tier armor, as well as improve or upgrade certain armors and items that don't originate from smithing. Shout out to Cerberus boots. Actually, that's rune crafting. Shout out to Godswords and Draconic Visages and all that madness. Strength, the ability to roll higher max damage and also increase accuracy due to that higher probability of those higher rolls. Thieving, access to unique NPCs and thieving opportunities for niche loot, GP items. And then finally, woodcutting, access to higher tiered trees for fire making and fletching. Okay, we've talked about the categories. We've talked about the skills within those categories. We've talked about what the sort of common denominator or common thread is through each of these skills. Why would you want to train them to begin with? Let's move on to Chapter 2 and understand the core gameplay loop for each skill. Let's start back at agility. Now, what do I mean when I say core gameplay loop? A core gameplay loop is essentially the repetitive action that you're going to take over and over and over and over again with this skill to level it up along your way to 99 or 200 mil if your name is Randy and you happen to be a cop and your last name is Alicious. All right. Agility. What we're doing here in the core gameplay loop, very simple. We're doing laps. We're clicking on click boxes. We're doing laps on agility courses to earn very slow XP. Does not even get remotely enjoyable until Howlett Sepulchre. So, also in this section, we're going to discuss some of the more popular or most prevalent or bearable training methods that most people do here. And for agility, it's pretty simple. It's rooftops, it's generic laps on whatever course you got at your disposal. Don't at me, the worm course is just a rooftop on the spine of some weird thing. And then, of course, Hallowed Sepulchre. So rooftops and Hallowed Sepulchre. Now, construction, you're simply building and removing objects over and over and over again to gain fast XP. You're losing lots of money here. Traditionally, of course, you have mahogany homes, which is a great, just simple, I would say lower XP, but also lower cost version of training construction. But yeah, it's essentially just a plethora of items that you're building, removing on repeat. Cooking, very simple, cooking low cost or minimally profitable foods at a range or at a fire, typically close to a bank. And you're watching shows on the side or listening to this podcast, right? Crafting, you're going to create items over and over and over again. Typically, those things are going to be jewelry items, armor, gems, spinning if you're into that thing, pottery if you're into that. You're probably not. Go see Ghost of Patrick, what's his face? Shout out to him, rest in peace. All right, so farming, you're planting various seeds. Typically during that downtime, you've got time to just play the game. You're doing things like herb runs. Farming contracts are also quite popular here. With fire making, you're just simply lighting logs over and over and over again. Shout out Maple Logs circa 07. Thought I could get 99 fire making. I didn't want to burn 10,000 of them mugs, however many it was going to be. Obviously, most people here just go to Wintertot. Pretty self-explanatory. Fishing, you're using various equipment to catch fish. You're either dropping them, you're banking them. Most popular methods include things like barbarian fishing, fly fishing, temporos, the fishing skilling boss. Of course, with fletching, you've got you're using a knife to turn logs into ranged equipment, or you're making ammunition of some sort. A lot of people are making darts using feathers and dart tips. Of course, unstrung bows are really popular. You got the new fletching minigame in Auburnvale, which is pretty great. It's very cyclical. It's pretty chill. Enjoy that. Of course, herblore, you have adding herbs to water vials and secondary ingredients to make those potions. You've got the new mastering mixology through Varlamore, another great skilling activity. Hunter, you are catching creatures. You're either releasing them, banking them, selling them, dropping them, whatever you want to do. It's pretty much Chinchompas all the way, baby. Of course, with the recent release of Hunter contracts, also in Varlamore, there's more of like a Slayer-esque, higher RNG element going on with Hunter that is more enjoyable. It's a little bit more variety going on. And it's quite nice. You do have this sort of ancillary loot system with the loot sacks, and there's a pet to obtain, the Hunter's outfit, of course, the Hunter's Guild, the 4 Hunter Masters and block lists, and all those fun things. So Hunter Rumors, very nice. Not too complex, very enjoyable. Of course, with mining, you're just mining rocks over and over and over again. A very predictable cycle, most likely. Mining, funny enough, as I was thinking through this, has lots of unique, like popular methods. You've got, and this kind of hints at something we're going to talk about later, which is this framework for skilling holistically. But mining, I think, is done more in this regard. I mean, you've got star mining for the AFK, you've got Motherlode Mine, which is semi-AFK, you've got Volcano, which is a skilling boss and positioning and everything else. You've got 3-tick Granite for you sweaty, buff wrist nerds out there. You got Blast Mine, Volcanic Mine, Amethyst, you name it, right? Got greens, beans, tomatoes, lambs, hogs, dogs, chicken, turkeys, you name it, mining's got it, baby. We'll circle back. All right, rune crafting. You're crafting runes. Go to Guardians of the Rift. You're AFKing Bloods and Souls. You're doing day alt for a little bit of saving time down the road. It's more of an investment, my guy. You're doing lava runes, the whole thing. Shout out Automology. Smithing, you're smelting and smithing bars. Typically, at the blast furnace, you got multiple pairs of gloves on. You're going gold, blue. You got that gold, got the ice. All right, Giant's Foundry. Or just some random, profitable break-even smithing, something like Addy plate bodies or similar. Last couple ones here, thieving. Of course, you're just pickpocketing. You're stealing items from someone or something, chests, people, whatever. Most popular things here are going to be things like blackjacking, RD Knights, pyramid plunder. I'm all about charming them snakes. All right, woodcutting. You're chopping trees over and over and over again. Popular methods here are going to be things like forestry worlds, not necessarily forestry itself, but just sort of cohabitating and skilling together, getting that little boost, going to the woodcutting guild, something like that, AFKing redwoods, you name it. And then finally, sailing. I think sailing kind of gets a bad rap a little bit, but sailing has some really well integrated skilling gameplay loops. I think salvaging kind of got your AFK going on. You're collecting things over time. Barracuda trials, more high focus. Got more hybrid skilling options and more on the way through things like deep sea fishing. Of course, charting and port tasks make things quite interesting, kind of similar to sailing or Slayer. I mean, so yeah, lots of things going on here. These are sort of the core gameplay loops for each skill, and then again, the most popular training methods that most people are doing there. So let's kind of move into this third section here, understanding skilling at a holistic level, because I'm really trying to tee us up for the back portion of this conversation where we talk about how we move skilling forward. Okay. So skilling has, like we've described, a core gameplay loop. This is the repetitive action that you're going to take over and over and over and over again. Okay. And we've just gone through what those core gameplay loops are for most of the skills. Now, if you've listened to any of the podcasts with JMods or you've just played this game a long time, enough to understand this, skilling has multiple levers by which it can be balanced that are not too dissimilar from PVM. Okay, the levers that we're working with here, in general, not all inclusive or exclusive here. You've got this XP to profit spectrum. Okay, anywhere from extremely low XP or even trickle XP for high profit. Trying to think of some examples here. I probably should have thought of those before I dove into this podcast. See if I can come up with any. Let me look at the skill menu. Let's go low XP, high profit. I mean, you've got some stuff in Herblore you can do. Regardless, you can probably think of some. On the flip side, you have high XP, no profit, or money sink. You're thinking basically things like construction training in general. Or you can kind of hit it right in the middle. You've got kind of medium XP, maybe you're making a little bit of money or only losing a slight amount of money. So again, this primary lever here, XP, XP, and profit. All right, another lever that you have to pull, we have focus versus effort, focus and effort. And so this spectrum that you're looking at is anywhere from fully AFK, something like 30 minutes at star mining, for example. Or, if you took Eternal Harvest on leagues like I'm doing right now, you just got 99 mining in an evening. You have low focus methods, something like Worm Agility Course. You have high focus methods, something like Sepulcher, or 3-tick Granite, 3-tick 4G, if you will. So you have this focus to effort lever, and then you also have the final lever, which is multi-skilling, integrating skills together for multi-skilling. So you can do combinations, you can do hunter and fishing, you can do whatever you want. You have multi-skilling options. Okay, so knowing all this is the foundation and the framework for skilling holistically. How do we actually push the skill forward? How do we push skilling as a concept forward in the game? All right, so let's talk a little bit about tick manipulation. What is tick manipulation? So, tick manipulation is essentially the act of manipulating the consistent time within the game um, to get an action quicker than expected. All right, and so what people are doing here is with skilling in particular, you're manipulating that time. You're manipulating time. For those of you who follow Mr. Rap Name Foggy on Instagram, you're manipulating time to get quicker resource extraction while still maintaining predictability and consistency. All right, so typically this involves using an item that starts a 3-tick action. You've got the herb tar, classic, knife+log, classic. And somebody talked to my boy Jim down there in Yama's lair. We got to get that sweat rag smuggled out of that hoe. We got to get that sweat rag out of there. Okay, Jim's wet rag, whatever's going on with that. But again, what this involves, you're clicking an item or items together to start a 3-tick action. Then you're either clicking the resource directly and or moving one tile. Don't ask, it kind of just depends on the method that you're doing. There are alternate methods that don't involve starting a 3-tick action by the player. You could do things like have an NPC damage you on the proper tick while you're auto retaliating with a bow and no ammo. This allows you to get into this 2-tick cycle. I've done this quite a bit with Teaks, for example, in Prif. This can be very useful and pretty chill once you kind of get into that cycle. All right, so now we understand. We understand consistent cycles. We understand the core gameplay loops of skilling. We understand the foundations of skilling. And I want to say this before we get into the topics of actually pushing skills further. You have to understand that at a foundational level, and we just read about when these skills were introduced into the game, most of them in 2001 up to 2006. All of them, in fact, other than sailing up to that time. You have to understand some of the core, I would say, principles or understandings that the company had at the time, that the founders had at the time. Something as simple as we never thought anybody was going to get to level 99. Okay. A thought like that leads to a skill like smithing, where you have this drastic imbalance between, what level 99 allows you to do or what the higher tier, skill levels in the skill allow you to access versus other skills required to use those outcomes. All right, so skilling, again, at like 99, you're making rune plate bodies. Again, rune plate bodies, everybody knows 40 defense and slay a dragon. All right, so you have this weird imbalance going on here. You see issues like this in crafting, where, I mean, we could go down the whole list here. You just open your crafting guide, go to jewelry, and just look at this. Just look at how this is scaled. You're kind of stretching tiers out. So things like sapphire, for example, you're stretching the basics of cutting a sapphire into making a ring and a necklace, bracelet, all this stuff across multiple tiers, and that carries through the skill. Emerald is the same way, ruby's the same way, diamond. You're stretching diamond into the late 40s, dragonstone from 55 up into the 80s. It just makes no sense. And so this is what I'm saying. To make a dragonstone amulet, which ends up being a glory, takes 80 crafting. You know what else you can do at 80 crafting? You can remove the little hammer. You can remove the hammer from a berserker ring. You can make Ultor, Venator, Bellator, Magus ring. 2 levels later, go ahead, make you an onyx necklace. 2 levels after that, make you a bracelet. Then 86, you got Rancor. This is where it starts to get real wonky. Current best in slot melee necklace is at 86, but just cutting a Zenite, which is required to make the Torture, which is required to make the Rancor, is 89. And the Zenite amulet is at 98. And so this is where you get in this weird, like, we didn't predict this type of reward compression that starts to create weird imbalances within skills and across skills. So we know what the skills are when they came out, and some of these principles that, again, the game is patchscape. They never thought we were going to get to these places. You have these weird misaligned, misbalanced, mismatched tiers across the different skills. And so how do we, knowing that, push the skill forward? I have some ideas. Let's talk about them here. All right. What's missing from skilling? You tell me. This is a quiz. You're getting graded. Hang on. Wait for it. Wait for it. ASMR. That was my red pen. You're about to get graded, dog. What is missing from skilling? I'm so glad you asked. Let me tell you. This is where we're going to deep dive a little bit here. Skill expression. I can hear you guys in the comments right now. Well, actually, as the glass is sliding up my nose, that's you typing furiously in the comments. Actually, tick manipulation is very high skill, and using. Shut up, dog. Shut up. Skill expression. Okay? Skill expression is missing. Outside of tick manipulation and just ridiculously high APM methods for all those buff wrist nerds out there, okay? What else is missing from skilling? Don't make me get my red pen back out. For the most part, okay? For the most part, intuitive rhythm and timing. Okay? What do I mean by that? Or even interactive might be the better word here. When you can get into those tick manipulated cycles, absolutely, it's rhythmic, but that's at a layer deeper than the average player is even going to know. Like, you have to either figure that out, pioneer that, or go to the wiki or learn it on YouTube. Like, you can't really figure that out intuitively. Okay, somebody did it 20-something years ago, and we all use it. Okay, but it's archaic. There's got to be a better way. So rhythm and timing. All right. Interactive skilling. We're going to talk about some ideas here. I got two more for you. I got two more things. RNG. Once again, I'm hearing the distant clack of a keyboard. Blah, blah, there's RNG in skilling, okay? What about my big harpoon fish I caught? It's useless, dog. Go shove it in your house. Go to Canifus. Go to the taxidermist. Let him stuff it for you before I stuff you in a locker. Davy Jones. All right, RNG. We're missing RNG. We're going to talk about how that is fundamentally flawed right now. And then finally, skilling activities that actually mirror PVM mechanics. And I'm not just talking skilling boss. I'm not talking Temperos where you're throwing harpoons at that dude. All right, skill expression, rhythm and timing, or interactive skilling rather, RNG, skilling activities. Let's dive into it. All right, skill expression. Skilling is such a phenomenal foundation for skill expression. You would think, right? It's in the name. Skilling could be so much more interactive than it is. I want you to imagine Hunter. I want you to imagine Hunter right now. Think about all the Hunter you've ever done. Think about the salamanders that Settle caught down there in Mauritania, that fishing net, that rope. Think about the chinchompas you've caught in the wilderness while you're getting PK'd. Think about the horned groks that you have teased down there in the jungle with your little lingerie on. You're teasing them with your stick. You know what I'm saying? You're like, come on, follow me, big boy. Fall into the trap. Think about all the hunter stuff you've done. Think about the deadfall traps. You've put a little stick under a rock and you've waited. And you've waited. And you've waited. And you've waited. If you've got Rune Light, you're watching that little timer tick down and you've waited and you catch something. You have no influence over catching a creature. We all used to think if we stood really far away from the trap that maybe the creature, the little chinchompa was just going to scurry in there. Man, it took us 18 years to figure out that crap didn't matter. Imagine if you could have influence over skilling in this way. Imagine if you set a deadfall trap and it was up to you to time when the deadfall trap falls and kills the creature for you to capture it. Lower tiered creatures, maybe early game, could have a more forgiving window of time. Maybe they sit under the trap a little longer, giving you just a little bit more time to click it. Maybe higher tier creatures require, one tick perfection. Okay. Let's think about how we could apply that to different skills. Okay. This type of interactive skilling, what it does is it's actually shifting the foundation of RNG. Okay. So right now, Hunter, as we're talking about, is fully RNG based on binary. Like, am I going to catch that thing or am I not? This ain't Pokemon. It's not 151. I ain't got to catch them all. Am I going to get the Chinchompa or am I not? Am I going to get it? Am I not? On, off, true, false, 0, 1. It sucks. It's like so basic. It's very Fisher Price of Jagex. All right. And so what you're doing is you're shifting the focus away from this like fundamental, I hope it happens, RNG to in the hands of the players. Okay. There's certain skills that really could kind of map this ideology onto them quite well. Hunter is the most obvious one, I think, in this regard. Other ones that really come to mind, things like agility. You know, there's been a lot of people that have talked about, posted about different agility ideas over the years. You've got the Cave of Wonders idea, very Aladdin style from Sebe. You could use stuff like that on here. But even at just a more basic level, you know, timing your jump appropriately. If there was a course, you know, think about Rogue's Den for just a moment. Go back to Rogue's Den in your mind when you went and got that ninja suit so you can get double loot, okay? There's lots of swinging blades in there and traps that are popping up, things like that. You should have to time your jumps and your movements around those obstacles, but you don't. You're just clicking and it's going. And I get it. It's ancient content, but that's another fantastic platform to layer on this type of skill expression. Okay, what about thieving? You get a little bit of this, just like the slightest amount with like pickpocketing citizens, I guess, like in Varlamore with the whole like kids and distraction and stuff. And there's some timing base to being in the house, but outside of that, you're just going to right click hell on blackjacking, you know, LSU looking mofos, purple and gold out there in the desert. It's stupid. What are we doing? And fishing, we have just the slightest tease of this with like the Napotsli dungeon or whatever in Moons, where you can actually kind of steer your net based on the trajectory of the fish. Oh, so simple. We could so easily shift RNG away from basic success and failure into something more interactive. Okay. Well, now you may be thinking, how does this work on skills that are largely based around resource nodes? Um, think about these skills. Think about wood cutting. Think about smithing. Think about mining. Okay. What you do here with skill expression is you actually start to introduce things like rhythm and timing. It's not necessarily about positioning or hitting it at maybe the exact right time, but it could be. For example, you could have, you know, let's take wood cutting for example. Right now, it's just click tree and wait. Do you get log? Do you not get log? You can imagine there could be, instead of forestry events where you're placing bees on a stick and telling a leprechaun to go shove it, instead you're trying to chop a tree in the right spot at the right time. Imagine looking at a redwood and there is maybe a grid of click boxes on the redwood where there's soft spots that you're trying to chop. You can choose to AFK, sure, you're going to get resources at a very similar rate. Or you can get into a cycle of timing where these soft spots are going to be based on the ticks that they're going to be mapped there, and you're hitting them at the exact right time. When you're in cycle, you're getting predictable resources and you're winning. You're Charlie Sheening on this thing. Mining, same idea. You've got, you know, resource nodes, you've got different rocks happening, click boxes on the rocks, very similar idea. Smithing, take the same idea as well. Timing your swing of the hammer, you know, very similar to Giant's Foundry, but not so baby, not so Fisher Price, right? You could apply this idea of clickbox timing to agility, wood cutting, fishing. A lot of the gathering and production skills make sense here. You could do this with cooking. You could do this with just about everything. I mean, let's just go down the list here. You could do this, I guess, a little bit with rune crafting, definitely with agility. You already are kind of doing this with mixology and herblore. Thieving, we've already talked about. Crafting and some other production skills get a little bit tricky here, but I think I have another idea for those. So crafting, of course, fletching gets a little bit wonky there. Fire making is useless. We're not even going to try to improve that. But let's shift back to this idea of RNG for just a minute. Okay, we talked about how the fundamental layer of RNG is this binary success or fail chance. We've talked about how we can add a layer of RNG. Um, I say RNG. We actually can add this layer of interaction with skill expression that doesn't take away from the current game. It just adds on to it. But let's talk about how we can actually incorporate RNG similarly to how it's incorporated with PVM. All right. Right now, like we've talked about, the bulk of RNG and skilling is at this base layer that is unseen and unable to be influenced by the player. You click on rock. Did you get resource? Yes or no? You pickpocket an elf. Success or stun. This basic RNG is frustrating because the player has no control over it. You can find this in virtually all gathering skills. Farming's got crop lives. Is it going to live? Is it going to die? We've already talked about the other ones ad nauseum, and I am nauseous, right? Some utility skills you can find it in agility. Am I going to, fail the obstacle, make the obstacle thieving, success, fail, that kind of thing. Some production skills. Am I going to burn the food with cooking, so on and so forth, right? My argument here is to actually add a more engaging layer of RNG to skilling. Okay, so the analogy I want to give before we get into this is I want you to imagine if combat in this game never progressed beyond click enemy, hit enemy, or miss enemy. You click a goblin. Do you hit a 0 or do you hit a 1? Oh, you leveled up strength. Okay, do you hit a 0, a 1, or a 2? That's binary. There's no skill happening here. Guys, it's called skills. Let's talk about it. I want to talk about this idea, and I don't think this is too far-fetched, this idea of like perfected or perfect or pure or enhanced resources. I think the naming doesn't really matter as much. I would equate this to getting, you know, every goblin drops bones, and every now and then you get goblin mail. You know what I'm saying? You're going to get consistent resources from a skilling node or a skilling activity, but then you also have an RNG based chance to get perfect, pure, enhanced, whatever you want to call it, resources on top of that. Okay. So here's why this is a net good for the game. Let's talk about this for just a moment here. Go with me. All right. Get your imagination brain on. Let's talk about specifics, and I think you'll understand the analogy. So let's talk about mining, for example. Mining, the perfected or pure ore that you mine occasionally, it could have a secondary benefit. Maybe it does not require coal to be smelted, or maybe it yields more bars when smelted because it is a perfected ore. Smithing could introduce something very similar. Maybe your perfect ore could be smithed into a perfect bar that again could produce more resources before being used up, and maybe there's layers of RNG within that. Maybe a perfected rune bar gives you more shots at making rune stuff before it disintegrates versus a perfected steel bar, for example. Okay. Fishing, you could introduce big fish outside of the ones that you taxidermy down there in Canvas, okay? Not just for trophies. A fish so large that maybe it has to be eaten in multiple bites, or has alternate healing or other passive effects based on the type of fish that you have caught that has this perfect or enhanced or big, resource tag. Cooking could be very similar. You could have delicious or perfectly cooked foods that have various effects as well. Maybe the taste lingers on your tongue, healing you extra health after a certain amount of time. We've seen a very similar mechanic through hunter foods, for example. The options here to layer on RNG are essentially endless. You can apply this to just about every skill. And what this does is it actually increases the profitability and the level of engagement with skilling because resources have better and more niche use cases. Okay. What this does for mains who are trying to, get to the end of skilling is it actually does power creep the skill a little bit, but it's all imbalanced because of supply and demand. The demand for perfected, enhanced, whatever, we'll just call them perfected, perfect resources is higher for players who can buy those resources, and therefore skilling becomes a little bit faster, but it's going to cost you more. Okay. This is why I love this. And I think you could balance that out by not adding perfected resources to the drop tables of PVM. Okay, so Zulrah, Vorkath, all these bosses that just absolutely obliterate you with skilling resources. There will be no chance of getting any perfected or enhanced resources from PVM activities. Period. Mic drop. Okay. I think this layer of RNG would be extremely beneficial to skilling as a whole. It would keep it more engaging. And so how do we round all of this out? How do we actually start talking about introducing this into the game? Before we get there, let's talk about skilling activities. I heard somebody talking recently about, well, you can't just turn skilling into PVM. And while I agree, I think there are a lot of PVM mechanics that we could adopt into skilling that would really, really enhance our experience. Okay, so what are those PVM mechanics that we could engage with? Well, first of all, there's movement and positioning. Again, that's very generic terms, but this idea ramps up in difficulty. Movement and positioning doesn't matter virtually at all when you're killing a goblin. Matters quite a bit in Corrupted Gauntlet. matters a whole hell of a lot when you're fighting demonic Brutus, okay? Avoiding certain tiles, standing on certain tiles, dodging damage. I mean, Volcano does a bit of this, right? So you have movement and positioning. Timing is inherently involved with that as well. Timing your attacks, whatever, just timing in general when you're choosing to make an action or to take an action or to move, for example. What about gear switching? Gear switching is extremely common and necessary in PvM encounters. It's virtually unused in skilling. Could be very interesting to layer some gear switching into that. And then finally, this idea of maintaining DPS, right? Like fast weapons, harder to use, slow weapons, easier to use in PvM. Maintaining DPS, or in skilling, that would equate to uptime on the resource or the boss or the activity or the skilling node, okay? So these are largely unexplored in skilling. You certainly see some of this in very simple forms, things like Temporos, Wintertod, Volcano, Volcanic Mine, mixology to a degree, but it's largely only been explored in skilling bosses, which I don't think is necessarily or inherently bad, but I think you could layer this in to skills either inherently in certain areas, adding activities. I even think you could introduce boss mechanics for skilling that are not just limited to things like movement, positioning, and timing, and even gear switching, which is already pretty minimal. But actually, this idea of maintaining DPS or even quote unquote taking damage. Let's talk about how you could take damage, because right now, the only skilling boss that really damage you is like Volcano and Wintertod, right? And you're using true damage, you're using hit points, you're using true health on your character. So for skillers, it's quite bad. Obviously, now you've seen the shift in Wintertod over to the warmth meter, which then can hurt your damage or whatever, right? Can kill you. But I think you could certainly explore a mechanic that doesn't necessarily damage you, but potentially lowers your skill level. And so you can treat your skill level almost like your hit points within the skill. So if you've got 70 mining, you've got 70 levels to play with when it comes to a mining activity or mining encounter, where your mistakes could cost you levels. And at a certain point, either you do take damage or you're unable to continue the activity until you bring your levels back up. And so let's say it's bring your levels back up to stay involved or engage in the fight or engage in the activity. You've got a market there for restores. You've got room for skill expression for never getting hit or hurt. I really think that's an interesting way to potentially go about things. Obviously, we've talked about items you could introduce. You could use the spec bar in a totally different way. You've talked about introductions of the action bar. But I actually want to talk about thematically how I think all this could best be fit into the game. Okay, and we're going to revisit an old friend here. On the count of three, everybody say it at the same time. 1. You heard it here first. 2. You saw it on the wiki. You voted for it. 3. Artisan. Artisan. All right. No, don't click away. Come back. Please don't go. Artisan's just Slayer for skilling. No, sir. That's what Artisan was pitched as. And I think Artisan, oh my goodness. There's so much to get into here. We're going to keep it brief. This podcast is already going long. All right, listen up. Yes, Artisan was pitched as essentially what Slayer is to combat and PvM, Artisan would be to skilling. In its simplest form, go to an Artisan person, an Artisan master, if you will. They give you a task. Go chop 100 magic logs. Cool, I'm going to go do that. Great, you did that. Go smith 100 addy bars. Cool, I went and did that. Oh, go kill Temporos. You got a skilling boss task. Go kill 5 of those. All that's fine. All that is fine. But if that is the totality of the skill, we're missing something. So, how do you tie all this together thematically? We've talked about pushing skilling forward by adding layers of RNG, layers of skill expression and engagement, layers of rhythm and timing. I think that Artisan in a thematic way could introduce these various layers. For example, pre-Artisan, before the skill comes out, everything that you've done in skilling has essentially been not artisan, but archaic. You have not known the ways of the masters. You've been hacking away at trees. You've been smelting in these weak furnaces. You've been mining rocks without any intentionality. Just clicking and waiting, clicking and waiting. All right, but through artisan, you start to learn these skill sets and get introduced to these mechanics as you level up the skill. Okay, and so yes, you're sent on tasks to go do things within a certain skill, but you're also sent to do those tasks in a different way, a more engaging way. And so rather than just chopping the tree 100 times, you have to chop the tree perfectly 100 times, which includes hitting those perfect soft spots on the redwoods, or you got to bring back X number of perfected bars to him that you have to make. Whatever the case may be, you can layer in these different elements through artisan as a skill. You meet different masters. I think you ideally, in my mind, I think you would have skill type masters, for example. So you'd have like a master artisan who's over all of it. Maybe there's an artisan guild where you get your skill cape. And there's a gathering artisan, there's a production artisan, there's a utility artisan, whatever, and you kind of go to those different artisans to sort of, I guess, funnel down into the types of skills that you want to be training. So you've got some gathering skills you want to work on, go to the gathering artisan, get some tasks from him, learn these different methods for those skill sets, continue to level up your artisan level, to access those things. There could be point systems, gear, just like the Slayer skill. My goodness, you could max this out, dude. You could absolutely max this out. This would be such a freaking blast. All right, now let me take you on something here. Whew. I think all this is very reasonable. I think we could see all this come into the game in the next several years. I'm gonna throw an idea out there. I'm gonna leave y'all with this. This one's wild. Okay, we're talking artisan. Now I want to imagine Renaissance. What does Renaissance mean? Try to Google it. I know you can't spell it right. Renaissance means rebirth. You ever play Call of Duty back in the day? You ever play Call of Duty back in the day? You ever prestige? Start back at level 1, run it back, do it all again, get something to flex on them with. Can you imagine if RuneScape had prestige? And I think the way you would do it, again, artisan. Through artisan, you're introduced to these Renaissance masters. Oh, I'm going crazy now. I'm going crazy. You don't have to like this one, but we don't have to do it, but listen up. Renaissance masters that allow you to prestige in your skills. Are you kidding me? All these 200 mil mofos out here got something to show for it other than the high scores? I'd be all about it. Be all about it. Be very interesting. All right, let me know what you think. Does skilling need a rework in general? Do we need to push skilling forward? How do we do it? Do we do it with RNG? Do we do it with rhythm? Do we do it with timing? Do we simply allow Jim's wet cloth to get out of hell in a handbasket? What do we do with skilling? Let me know what you're thinking. Let me hear your takes in the comments below. Today's question: what is your favorite skill? What is your favorite non-combat, including Slayer? You can't say it. You can't say Slayer. My finger's up. You heard it here first. You can't say Slayer. What is your favorite skill? Drop it in the comments. Answer it on the polls. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.